everyone would stand for the moment of silence and the pledge.
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first item on the agenda is the roll call.
Chairman Floyd, Vice Chair Harrison,
Present.
Deborah Thomas, Jeremy Burnett, Michelle Childs,
Here.
and Superintendent Horrell.
All right, we do have a quorum. The next item on the agenda is the opportunity for public comment. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak? Hearing none. Mr. Superintendent, will you lead us through the rest of our agenda?
I will. The first item is the reports section, starting with the TLN representative update.
I have one. The General Assembly adjourned.
All right. Next item is the superintendent's report. We do have two items under the superintendent's report. We have the April.
Wanted to follow up with an item from last week that we had talked about in regards to about being within a district for a year or to running for election and how that might be interpreted for municipalities. At this time,
We can do it now. Yeah, yes, I had that, and then I had another couple of follow-up things that, from y'all's questions. But Mr. Plumley, I know he sent some information.
Do you want to address her, or do you want me to, Dr. Hall? You were planning on it. I don't want to, get you off.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Plans. Okay. So what Mr. Burnett asked about last week was a piece of legislation that that requires a year of residency for people that are gonna run for school boards, and I believe that only applies to county districts. I talked to Dr. Horrell about this after Mr. Burnett asked me to look into it, and I pointed out that as a practical matter, the Lakeland School Board policy already requires a one-year residency term before running for election, with a difference that 1 year starts running at a different time. If I'm remembering it correctly, the 1 year for Lakeland under its current policy starts, the 1 year requirement would begin a year before the election, whereas the new legislation that I believe only applies to county districts is 1 year before the qualifying deadline to run, so effectively a longer period. I don't know of anything that would prohibit Lakeland from changing its policy if it wanted to make a longer running period by starting the year using the qualifying deadline as the starting point for the residency requirement. Obviously, I think it would have to happen, after this election. But if the policy, the school wanted to change the policy to make it consistent with the new Tennessee law that, again, I think only applies to county districts, I wouldn't see any reason why you couldn't. That answer your question?
Mr. Plumley also noted that that LSS elections are conducted in a manner consistent with the Lakeland Charter, which requires commissioners to be residents but doesn't have a time requirement. So our own organization, as Mr. Plumley said, has a time requirement, but the measuring of that time differs slightly from all states.
Practical matter, what that means is currently that would be November of 21, someone who wanted to run for school board this upcoming session. First, if we did go to match, that would be June. When is it the first date? I think it's July or August. So really, we're talking about a 90-day differential.
I don't know what the qualifying deadline is, but whatever the difference would be, whatever the difference is between the deadline and the election date.
You would feel comfortable if, as a board, we wanted to change that after this election.
I didn't see anything that would prohibit you from doing that. Like Dr. Horrell pointed out, Lakeland School Board is always, the way the policy is read is that it handles its elections consistent with the city of Lakeland, with their Board of Commissioners. But as much as that is always how we've done it, I guess the one discrepancy is the city does not actually have a residency requirement. So
Length of time.
for a length of I'm sorry, a length of time. So since the school already has one, the school already had one, and the city said theirs was 1 year from the date of the election, I'd be a little bit more reluctant to say I couldn't think of any reason not to say changing it would be not problematic. But seeing how the city doesn't have any time period for residency, I don't see, and the school board already does have one, I don't see any reason why school board, if it wanted to, after the election, could make that change to the current policy.
I'll go ahead, and there were a couple other questions that came up during the last meeting that I was going to respond to during my report. We had a question from the work session regarding the number or percentage of students that were attending the summer learning camps versus those that had been deemed eligible or invited. At Lakeland Elementary School, we have 149 students attending the camps. There were 253 determined to be eligible, and that is 58.9% of those that were eligible that actually, I guess, took us up on the offer, as you'd say. And that at Lakeland Preparatory School, there are 44 students that are enrolled, and there were 249 who were invited. So that's only 17.7%. So a much smaller percentage at the middle school might make sense if you consider childcare and things like that the middle schoolers could presumably stay home by themselves for the most part. But that is the answer to the question. There was also a question requesting a registration update, and I have those numbers as well. The number that have registered at this point, and I can either do it by grade level or by school, or maybe I'll do it by both if that's what you'd like. And I can.
Does anybody have any objection to school? Just the details.
I can send you the details, of course. Yeah.
School.
So right now, at this point, we have 801 that are formally registered at Lakeland Elementary and 972 that are formally registered at Lakeland Preparatory School.
For clarity, does the LES number include pre-K?
It does not include pre-K.
It does include kindergarten.
Yeah, kindergarten. Right now, I'll give you, right now we have 122 students registered for kindergarten. So there's obviously typically a lot of late kind of registrants on that. Then the other question involved the charge-offs, the new charge-offs policy for the cafeteria. There were some questions about the number of students that were actually, I guess, involved in that or were represented by those charge-off numbers. So at Lakeland Elementary School, the charge-offs number was $535.56, and that was 58 students basically that were covered under that. At LPS, it was $1,611.85, and that represented 134 students. So the questions also were asked, and I just wanted to confirm about, the changes. We actually instituted a charge-offs policy just before the pandemic shutdown started and all the lunches were free. So there hasn't been a need to basically execute on that. But the thought is now the new procedure would be on a monthly basis. The cafeteria managers would turn those numbers in to a school designee to try to stay on top of that.
Higher numbers at LPS, you said, represented students who may have had some charge-offs at LES.
Absolutely.
It was accounted for at the time.
There's some students that had charges at LES. They pulled them through LPS, and they're probably well on their way to graduating at Arlington High School right now. I'll go back to the financial summaries. They are published and noted. There are no irregularities as we move through the end of the fiscal year. No issues to report there.
One question. So I assume with the we started that historical tracking on those to kind of notate that spike that we may see related to construction and
So we won't, the MLGW bills right now go to Chris Wood's Construction until they turn over the building. They're their bills and not ours. So we don't yet have a sense of what the high school building will add to that. Yeah.
That's interesting. Even with it being on the same property, I guess it has a different address.
Yes.
The meters.
Right.
Questions for the superintendent on the financial summary?
Next item is the approval of the agenda.
Is there any items that any board member would like to add to the agenda? Items, and I'll go ahead and skip to,
And
Golf.
should we take the school board off the consent agenda since there was some conversation around that, or moving that?
we had a change last week that we,
You are correct, Mr. Burnett. Yes, thank you. We should remove that. Yep.
all right. So, school board calendar. Changes to the agenda. Great. Hearing none, the agenda is approved as. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Sorry. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, we have item number 6 on the discussion items is the school board calendar and the consent agenda. Was the agenda approved as amended? Any who would like to move to pass the consent agenda?
So moved.
Yeah.
I'll second.
And last chance, anybody have any other items to remove from the consent? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion.
As we move into the discussion items, the first item is discussion action on the 2022-23 protected reading list.
Moved.
I was going to note, thank you to
Okay,
Ms.
'cause
Childs
I-
for making the change. We did have one of the authors was incorrect, is turned in. That has been updated to Ernest Klein. There is still one clerical error. It says Ready Player One, and we can take that off.
It's
No,
correct.
it's
Is it
called
corrected?
It's in.
Okay, well, we can make that as an amendment, or we can, I mean, it's a clerical error as well.
Full item for correction. Hearing none. All in favor of approving the protected reading list, the 2022-23 protected reading list with the clerical correction, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passed.
Next item is discussion on superintendent contract.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
So moved.
Motion and there is and a second. Kevin is not here to discuss. If y'all recall from our meeting last week, it is that time of year where the superintendent's contract is up for review. Is there any nominations to review the superintendent's contract?
I would nominate Ms. Harrison.
I'd be honored to take this task on again. Is there any more discussion about nominations for the superintendent contract? Hearing none, all in favor of approving myself to work with Dr. Horrell on a contract review and potential extension, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is discussion action on review of library collections.
Motion to get this item on the floor?
So moved.
A motion and a second. Dr. Horrell, will you speak to this? item?
I will. It's a brief update. I really won't be requesting any action tonight. Just wanted to give a note that the chief academic officers of the municipal school systems have worked together. They've actually gotten some support from Valerie Speakman, who represents both Germantown and Arlington, to give some guidance on trying to make sure we're on the same page with this. So we are basically reviewing the draft copy at this point that was produced by that group, and I'll be speaking to the board members individually about some potential tweaks, but just to give an update, the plan is to get that on the July agenda for approval. You don't have to do anything, yeah.
I was just gonna
Go ahead.
ask, because I did read an article someone sent me or popped up about Germantown and some of the specific things they put about having a parent on that team. Is that something you're thinking about, or I can?
Ask me to think about it, yes,
I would
of
ask you to
course.
think about it. Then
You may
as we
do
meet
that.
and
There'll be a
talk
number of
individually.
things as we get closer to July, yeah.
All right, great, thank you.
And since we had technical issues with last week's meeting, can you speak to why the library collections review is a thing that we're tackling? Can you speak to that?
Yes, and we did post the meeting from last week. We just did it the
Right.
next morning, so it is
Right.
available. This was state law, basically, that was passed that has certain parameters that the school systems have to follow regarding publishing the books that are part of the school library collections, and then a specific process for parents who object to items in those collections. What the objection process is, how those items will be reviewed, and what would ultimately lead to a board decision on whether items remain part of the library collection.
For the public out there, the library collection is not collection of overdue fees or anything else. This is the library books that students are allowed to have access to in our school system. Just what collections mean. All right, so we'll just have this item carry over to our July agenda.
Next item is discussion action on policy 4.209, alternative credit options.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
So moved.
Is there a second? I have a motion and a second. Dr. Horrell, would you like to speak to this item?
This is the second reading technically of this new policy that basically just discusses the parameters under which courses taken outside of the normal kind of face-to-face delivery would be considered and possibly accepted as credits.
On one on page 2, 5 and 26, lines 25 and 26. If there's an appeal and that appeal comes to the board for a hearing, the board shall determine whether there was an error in denying the student ability to participate in the course access program. I thought that the board would only look at error in a procedural perspective or an error in judgment on application of the policy.
It's a great question. I know this came from the Tennessee rules and regs, so we'd have to take a look at that. I would assume either would be a cause to overturn the decision.
Okay, and it's not a deal, just a clarity point as I read that a little deeper today.
Yeah, and the course access program is actually a specific program. The rest of it were parameters that we were allowed to set and kind of have some discretion. But the course access program is, as you can see from the citations, kind of regulated by state law. So there's probably an answer to that, but I don't know the answer.
Second one was, I know for dual enrollment, in some cases, there are institutions who dual enrollment on campus at the high school. Challenges sometimes in credentialing faculty members who are the teachers of record at the high school. When they do that, institutions will actually offer that course as an online course through dual enrollment in the building, many cases. See this policy interfering with that, since that would be dual enrollment instead?
No, and in fact, this contemplates students being in the building taking the courses. So for example, occasionally we'll get a transfer student, and let's say they've taken let's say they've taken German 1, and we don't offer German. So that would be a situation where instead of sitting in the classroom in the building, taking their second foreign language credit, they would be in an alternative location in the building, perhaps taking an online German 2 course. And in fact, we've had that happen at the middle school already. We had students that were looking to take a level of, they were looking to take Spanish 2, for example. So that would not interfere. In fact, that's covered here. Okay. So they would have to have approval before doing that, which they obviously would if it was a dual enrollment. In fact, they'd have a lot of approvals beyond this. So this should be in line with that.
All right, great.
More discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is discussion action on the FY 22-23 consolidated funding application.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor? Is
So moved.
there a second? A motion and a second. Dr. Horowitz.
This is our annual approval, and I want to shout out Tammy Wilson, our federal programs director, who does most of the heavy lifting on the consolidated funding application, although there's many hands that are involved with this. But this is the baseline for the federal grants that we receive through the state that, as the board knows, are updated throughout the year.
None. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is discussion action on update to the 2022-23 school board calendar.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
So moved.
Is there a second? Motion and a second. Dr. Horowitz.
Yes, at the last meeting, at the work session, we discussed an amendment that would move the September business meeting to the 19th. I'll actually be in Gatlinburg for the TOS conference that week, and sent an email to the board asking if we could look at Tuesday, September 6th. So we would move it back a day after Labor Day for the September meeting.
Make a motion to amend the meeting schedule to reflect September 6th as our only business, or only meeting that month as a business meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion regarding the amendment.
And that can be our regular meeting. It's not going to be a special called meeting, right?
Correct.
Right. Do it through this process, that's right.
Any discussion, any other discussion on amendment? It's moving it to Tuesday, September 6th at 5:45 PM at Lakeland City Hall. Right? Hearing no more discussion, all in favor, and we're only going to vote on the amendment. In favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The amendment passes. We're now back on the main motion. Is there any more discussion on the main motion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
For items.
Are there any announcements? Hearing none, I don't have any either. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. We are adjourned.
I almost did it.
With this.